Yeah, we have a great team. It was so good.
Yeah, that's for sure. That is for sure. And good morning, Leslie. I don't know
Good
if you,
morning.
hey, all right. So today's going to be a great call. We're going to talk about brain health and diabetes and blood sugar. Yeah, welcome everybody. Let me just do a little intro here. So this is our Tuesday at noon call that we have been doing for like 7 or 8 months now, I believe. Whatever, I think it was August of 2019 we started these, and Dr. Saunders has been awesomely faithful in showing up and helping people navigate the journey to not having type 2 diabetes anymore and fixing blood sugar issues. So we are here to help you guys. Whoever is on here can ask questions about really anything regarding type 2 diabetes and today brain health. Also, let me just do a little shout out to if you're looking for resources, if you're watching this later, if you haven't registered to watch us live, you can do that by visiting bartonwebinar.com. That's bartonwebinar.com. And then on that page, we've got our products like the diabetes solution kit that if you don't have a copy of this, you can get the digital version for less than $20. So strongly encourage you to get this because this is really what Dr. Saunders teaches to his patients and also teaches to people that watch this and anybody that works with Barton Publishing. So get a copy of this at bartonwebinar.com. There's a link on the page. Also, we have our YouTube channel is linked from that page as well. You can find us if you go to YouTube and search Barton Publishing Webinars, I believe. And you can subscribe to our channel and watch all of the other webinars or any that you choose or decide are relevant to you. So we've talked about all sorts of things related to diabetes and blood sugar. We talked about high blood pressure. We talk about fasting. We get a lot of questions about fasting. We've talked about metformin, medications, how to work with your doctor to get off medications and things like that. So anyways, Dr. Saunders, you're always good at giving a good little disclaimer because it really makes sense when you say it. So I'd love if you could do that again. We sometimes forget to do it, but yeah.
Okay, so the disclaimer is that what we say here applies to groups in general and does not necessarily apply to any one individual. That's why you need to work with your doctor to determine if the things that we talk about are right for you. Does this fit your situation specifically? We try to be general and say, if you have, type 1 diabetes, this won't apply to you. If you have type 2 diabetes, this will apply to you. If you have high insulin, it'll apply, but if you have low insulin, it won't apply. We try to include that, but it's important that you work with your doctor so that you know what your specific problem is and how it applies to you specifically.
Yes, thank you very much. All right. So like we mentioned, we got the Barton Publishing team together in Utah for a little team get together retreat. And we went on this awesome hike on Friday, I believe it was. How many miles did we go? Like 6 or something like that?
Yeah, I think it was close to 6.
Yeah, it was through the canyon somewhere between Huntsville and Ogden.
Karen's still sore from that hike.
That was not just a regular hike. That was an intense hike.
Yeah, well, and Karen had been practicing not eating for a while, so she was looking like she ran out of energy pretty early, but we were there to carry her if we needed to. So that was a great time. We got some exciting news that Leslie will share a little bit later that we're going to be improving the recipe section of the diabetes solution kit, and we'll be sharing that. So anybody that's purchased that in the past will get updated with the new version of that for free. You don't have to pay for it again. So, and yeah, she's going to share more about that at the end here. So hang on for that fun news as well. So let's get started with the topic of the day. Dr. Saunders, let's take it away and let's talk about the brain.
Okay. As you can imagine, your brain is your most important organ in your body. Well, most important in many aspects. You can't live without your brain. You can't exist without your brain. You can't think, if your brain doesn't work, then it doesn't work. So I have, like, for example, in the nursing home in Santa Barbara, we have people who are very famous, very wealthy, who have Alzheimer's disease and dementia and can't remember anything that they do. So who cares if you own the whole world if your brain doesn't work? You've got to have your brain working. It's the most important thing. Even if your body doesn't work, if you still have a brain, you can get around in a motorized wheelchair or something, and you can still think and act and do stuff. But if your brain doesn't work, then it doesn't matter what else you have. It's no good. So protecting your brain is, if not the most important, clearly one of the most important things that we can do. So about the brain. The brain takes about 20% of all your blood flow. Your brain is using a ton of energy all the time. It's using the sugar, it's using fats and proteins, and it's rebuilding, and there's this constant supply, but because it's using so much energy, it's making a lot of oxygen-free radicals. So one of the things the brain has is a lot of oxidation going on. So there's damage being done to the brain because of all this energy that's being used all the time. So to protect our brain, we really need to be able to get rid of all those oxygen-free radicals. We need to be able to get rid of all the waste products that are being made. And it doesn't happen easily. One of the interesting things that only recently has been found out is that the brain has a lymph system. And a lymph system is a drainage system. And now that we have high resolution MRIs, it can actually be shown that during the day, your brain swells. You have an itching, swelling brain. If you're into punk rock, your itching, swelling brain, it gets bigger during the day. And then when you go to deep sleep at night, all of that lymph drains and detoxifies and everything at night as you sleep, so that you clean out your brain. If you don't, what happens? Well, they build up, and the buildup are things that we call tau proteins. They are toxins that build up in the brain and cause memory deficits like Alzheimer's disease. In fact, we bring this in with diabetes because diabetes is the #1 cause of Alzheimer's disease. In fact, many doctors, many of the researchers are calling dementia type 3 diabetes because it's so prevalent with diabetes. Very, very important to protect your brain when you have diabetes.
Yeah. So can you talk about, like, what does blood sugar, like high blood sugar, how does that affect the brain? You talked about how 20% of our blood goes to our brain, and we know our brain needs sugar to run. So what happens if it has too much sugar?
Oh, that's a great question. Because the brain has to have a constant supply of sugar. There's no storage. Whereas in your muscles and your liver and other areas of your body, there's storage of sugar. If you run out of sugar, if your blood sugar drops down to 0, your liver doesn't care, your muscles don't care. They can continue to function. They can work on fat. But your brain has to have a constant supply of sugar. Well, if your blood sugar is high all the time, then the transport proteins that move the sugar into the brain from the blood are diminished. They shrink down. There's fewer and fewer of them. Why is that important? Well, our brain has what's called a blood-brain barrier. And we think of the barrier as preventing toxins from getting into our brain, but that's not really what it's about. It's about maintaining the integrity of the brain no matter what's going on in the blood. So things have to be actively transported into the brain from the blood in order to get there. And one of those things that has to be actively transported is sugar. So if you have a ton of sugar outside all the time in the blood, and you have fewer and fewer and fewer glucose transport proteins, then your brain is getting less and less sugar over time because it can't be transported into the brain. So what happens? Well, you lose the ability to do, your brain stops functioning well because you don't have enough energy in it. And one of the first things to go is your memory. The second thing to go is cognition. So at first you just can't remember things right. And you go, dang, I keep forgetting things. Most often though, everybody around you is going crazy because you can't remember things, but you feel just fine. Just like, you know, your brain makes up for the losses inside, and where it's not working right, you think that you're doing it just fine, that you're remembering things just fine. Everybody around you go, I just told you that. You asked me 5 times. But your memory isn't working, and that could be because of a lack of sugar in the brain because your blood sugar is too high. Isn't that ironic?
It is. Interesting.
Good question. It's amazing that, you know, that's the way the system works.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned new research. I was going to ask you, you know, what's new that we're finding in the brain, and you talked about the lymph nodes in the brain. Is that what you said?
No, it's a lymph system. Everywhere in your body, you have a lymph system that takes all of the extra fluids and the toxins and everything out of tissues, and it goes back into the blood and goes through the liver and gets, you know, detoxifies things, and through the spleen and gets strained out, filtered, and through the kidneys too. So those are the organs that detox the lymph system. But the lymph system actually is in the tissues. It's not part of the blood. It's a separate circulatory system. It doesn't have a heart. The way it works is with movement. As you're moving and doing stuff, then it has valves in it that allow it to flow only one way. So it goes a little bit this way and then stops on the valve, and then goes a little bit that way, stop, as it moves along. And so that's one of the reasons why movement is so important for detoxification. We have to exercise. Well, your brain, the lymph system drains at night. During the day, we're making this free radicals, and we're getting more blood into the system, and we're creating all of this sort of buildup of lymph. And then at night, during deep sleep, all of that drains back into the blood and then goes in and gets detoxed and everything.
Okay. So we've talked in the past about how type 2 diabetes can be reversed for most people, but there's also, you can get to a certain point where you're pretty much beyond repair in some cases. And I would imagine the same thing is true with the brain. So if somebody starts noticing, or their family tells them, hey, you're not, you know, doing so good, you're like, you keep asking or forgetting all these different things. Like at what point, like, yeah, how much can the brain be repaired?
Okay, I get what you're asking, because I went to a conference on this, and one of the conference members raised his hand and essentially asked the same question. The researcher that was doing this is Dr. Bredesen at UCLA, and he wrote a book called The End of Alzheimer's. So they asked him, how far can you go before you can bring people back? Because he did research, and 29 out of 32 people were reversed. Their Alzheimer's was completely reversed on his protocol, his program. And he said, he says these other ones had gone too far. So someone raised his hand, how far can you go to pull somebody back? He says, well, it's not a point, it's a continuum. And so he says, it's kind of like people are going downhill. They're losing their brain function. They're getting farther and farther down the hill. When they're near the top of the hill and you just barely notice a difference, it's pretty easy to bring them back. As the further they get down the hill, the harder it is and the longer it takes to bring them back up the hill. And they really need a lot more help. So when people are near the top of the hill and they're just barely not working right, they can often do a lot of it themselves. But by the time they get down to the part where, they're forgetting what they ate yesterday and they don't know your name and they can't remember the name of their dog, then by that time, they really need help. They need somebody to put them through the program and bring them back to full function in their brain.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. All right. So talk about what is normal for like memory loss or whatever, because I mean, I think for most of my life, I've had moments where I'll walk in the other room and I'll stand there like, what in the world did I just come in here for? And it's like, oh yeah, I was going to get, some paper clips or something. So
Yeah.
how much of that is just normal?
Okay. So it's hard to know exactly where to draw the line as far as what's normal. So you have these two sort of separate memories. You have a short-term memory and a long-term memory. And we should be able to maintain in our short-term memory a certain amount of information to, even though we get distracted. But very often, if you have something in your short-term memory, like I'm going into that room to get some paper clips, and on your way in, you think about, oh, I didn't pay my taxes this year. Gosh, I got to call the tax guy. And then you go, oh, why did I come in this room? Because now what was in your short-term memory didn't get put into long-term memory, and now you've got this other distractions that have kind of washed out your short-term memory and left it blank, and now you can't remember. But sometimes you can pull it out of long-term memory and go, oh yeah, I was over. If you go through the steps, oh yeah, I was over at my desk over there. Oh, and I pulled out the drawer. Oh yeah, I was looking for a paper clip. And then so you go to the paper clip. So sometimes you can go through the steps to find it again. Yeah. And that's all normal. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with losing your short-term memory occasionally, or even long-term memory, forgetting names. Most of those have more to do with stress than anything else. Stress actually prevents the short-term memory from getting into the long-term memory and prevents some access of short-term memory. So it's not a simple thing to say that whatever, if you lose your memory at all, then it's gone for good. Mm-hmm. You don't know.
And I mean, in some ways, your brain is a muscle that needs to be exercised too. And like sometimes we don't necessarily learn how to remember things very well. And a friend of mine, Jim Quick, KWIK, he's got really good resources and podcasts and all that he teaches like how to remember things better. So there's like certain techniques you can use that, if you want to remember people's names, he could remember 500 people's brand new names of somebody, just through this system that he compartmentalizes using like picturing a house he's walking through or something like that, and different things like that. But I think today we're talking more about like, losing some brain function due to, high blood sugar, basically. So yeah, why don't you bring us the good news and tell us like, what is the plan and what are some strategies to overcome these issues that help?
Okay, some strategies. Number one, making sure that you get your blood sugar down periodically. Now, here's a really interesting, some research that was done on rats, for example. They gave the rats insulin to keep their blood sugar down to about 40. And these rats, of course, with the low blood sugar, they're like, they're laying around, they can't think, they probably got migraine headaches, and they're all whining and complaining. And for about 3 days. On the fourth day, these rats are up running around and they're doing fine. And so they did a biopsy of their blood-brain barrier, and they found 10 times the number of glucose transport proteins than they started with. So the course of 3 days of hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, allowed these rats to normalize their blood-brain barrier so that they could get sugar into the brain normally again. So one of the things you want is low blood sugar. Well, how do you do that? Well, if you read the diabetes reversal program, the diabetes solution kit, what you'll find is the very first part, the phase 1 program, is a very low carbohydrate diet. We allow 20 grams a day. Less is fine. You can do even less than that. And during that period of time, your brain isn't getting enough sugar, so you have to start burning fat. And when you start burning fat, most of your brain cells can use ketones for energy, which come out of fat burning. And so during that time, you have low blood sugar, but your brain can use the ketones. And so what your blood-brain barrier then does is increase the number of glucose transport proteins because the glucose is low in the blood. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So phase 1 is the number one way of getting that done. Now, people will tell you, and there have been many people selling things that are telling you, we will sell you the ketones. So you can just mix a ketone drink up and drink it down. Does that work? Maybe, but if your blood sugar is still 300 and you're adding ketones in, number one, it might help your brain a little bit. People have noticed a difference, but what it's not going to do is fix the problem, because the number of glucose transport proteins is still too low because your blood sugar is remaining elevated and you're just downing this drink that has extra ketones in it. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. I was going to ask you about ketones too. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a huge, huge thing, especially because there was a story of a doctor whose husband was starting in Alzheimer's and was, far enough along that he couldn't remember recent events. And she started putting coconut oil in his coffee every morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he got better, and she reported it and said, this coconut oil really helped.
Mm-hmm.
The reason coconut oil is because it has some what are called medium chain triglycerides that go into the liver and are made into ketones pretty quickly, and then the brain can use those. So so the ketones may be a temporary fix, but it's not a solution. The solution is like the book. That's why we call it the Diabetes Solution Kit. It's not just a patchwork of fixing something temporarily. This is like really how you should do it.
Mm-hmm. So the other day we toured our supplement manufacturing company in Utah, which was awesome. And those guys are so impressive. The amount of research and testing they do and making sure every ingredient is exactly what it says it is. And one of the things that we kind of noticed was they had pallets and pallets and pallets full of this. I think it was called keto BHB,
Betahydroxy Butyrate.
Butyrate, yeah. And we talked a little bit about that, but I thought that was interesting. If you wanted to share that with people here.
Yeah, the Betahydroxy Butyrate is the main keto acid that's made when we burn fat for energy. And those keto acids then can get into the blood-brain barrier, cross the blood-brain barrier into the brain, and allow the brain to use that for energy. And so because of how that works, people are starting to sell this beta-hydroxy butyrate in large amounts. It's huge. It's everywhere. And the guy that was giving us the tour said, "Oh, everybody's getting on board with this. This is really big, the BHB." But I'm telling you, yes, it may work temporarily, but it's not a solution.
Yeah.
Not a solution.
Yeah, that was interesting. Okay, so phase 1 really is the biggest, key to getting your brain repaired, and that's lowering your carbohydrates to 20 grams of carbs per day or less. What are some other things that we can talk about that help?
We often talk about supplements and what kinds of supplements are needed. And in this case, we don't always know what supplements are needed because we don't know what you're deficient in. So if you have a lack of zinc, you need zinc. If you have a lack of copper, you need copper. In fact, having a copper to zinc ratio, which is roughly equivalent, about the same amount of copper in your blood as zinc. What is that? I couldn't see it.
I'm putting some zinc in my water right here.
Oh.
So, yeah, I'm low in zinc.
Upgraded zinc.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yep.
I take zinc, and in fact, I think that most men in our society should be taking zinc because zinc is required to make testosterone. And so we use a lot of zinc in the enzymes that we have for testosterone. Zinc to copper ratio. Another thing that's really important is B vitamins. I am amazed at how many people are deficient in vitamin B12. In spite of all of the foods that we eat that contain vitamin B12, like all of the meats, meat and milk and cheese. And some people live on that kind of stuff that should have a lot of vitamin B12 in it. But I'm finding a lot of deficiency when I test. Vitamin B12 is really important for energy production. And if the brain doesn't have energy, it just doesn't work right.
I was just researching metformin yesterday, and B12 deficiency or like losing B12 or not absorbing B12 or something was one of the common side effects. So I wonder if that was connected to that or how that works.
Yeah, the connection is what you said, that if you're taking metformin, because of the effect that it has on the intestines, you don't absorb the vitamin B12 as much. I'm going to make a comment on this. You're going to be amazed because it's going to make you believe in God. There's just no other way. When there's only an 18-inch section of your small intestine that can absorb vitamin B12. If you don't have that, if you had surgery and get that cut out and taken out of your intestines and then put together, you won't absorb vitamin B12. You will get no significant amounts of vitamin B12. So you have that 18 inches now, but that's not all of it. Inside there's little sensors that sense vitamin B12, and they taste, I taste vitamin B12. So what it does is when the food comes down and it tastes vitamin B12, it goes back and forth and back and forth and pushes it back and forth through this 18-inch section of intestine until the sensors go, nope, there's no more vitamin B12 there, and it moves right on down the road. It's just so amazing. So what if you have like irritable bowel syndrome or inflammatory bowel disease, or you're taking a drug like metformin or metoclopramide or these drugs that move things through the intestines? Now the food comes down and you taste the B12 and it's gone. Oops. Mm-hmm. You just did, you may absorb a little bit, but you're not going to get all your vitamin B12. So having a functional intestine is really important. And so I suspect that that's the issue. That It's not that we're not getting sufficient, because people are popping pills all the time. But even then, if it goes right through that section of intestine, too late. You didn't get all of it because it didn't go back and forth until it all got absorbed.
So does that apply? Does that work the same way if you get a B12 shot?
Good point. Okay, so if you get a shot, it gets into your blood, and you don't have to worry about absorption. And that's why people who get like intestinal surgery, that part of their small intestine removed, they have to get shots. Like every month they have to get a shot, or every week to every month, depending.
Okay, so all right, let's say people are not absorbing B12 and they don't like getting shots, which I can't blame them. How do you fix the small intestine so that it does absorb all of that?
Well, it depends on what the problem is. The general repair for the small intestine happens after 8 hours of fasting. So the system that repairs the small intestine includes stem cells that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, and repairing all of the damage that's been done, and getting rid of the bacteria, cleaning out the small intestine. All of that happens. It starts within 8 hours of fasting. So in this case, fasting periodically is really, really, really important. So here's the other half of that, is that your stomach has to make something called intrinsic factor that binds to the vitamin B12 and allows it to be absorbed. If you don't have that intrinsic factor from the stomach, you're not going to get vitamin B12. I don't care how many pills you pop. You're not going to get it, because the cobalamin molecule is this huge molecule that doesn't cross through any barriers. It has to be actively absorbed by finding the intrinsic factor and being pulled through the lining of the small intestine. at a specific spot that has receptors for that intrinsic factor. So the stomach irritation, like gastritis or ulcers or acid reflux, which we have a book about too, all those kinds of things or taking medications like omeprazole. I'm trying to think of the brand name at the same time. Prilosec, omeprazole, or Acifex, or any of the acid reducers also reduce your intrinsic factor, so you can't get vitamin B12. So there's a lot of reasons why we have a large number of people who have brain problems because they don't have enough vitamin B12.
Yeah, very interesting. Well, that's a strong connection there, and metformin, that's a big reason, another reason why to get off of metformin by doing things naturally and getting your carbs down and all that stuff. So if you're interested in learning about metformin, we've covered that topic a couple times before on previous webinars, so go ahead and check those out. So all right, so let's transition a little bit here. We've had quite a few questions come in. Leslie, if you can kind of take over here and ask a few questions from people that are watching us live right now.
Yeah, this was just a really recent question. I'm going to quick ask this. This is from Krish, one of our friends here on the webinar. Welcome back, Krish. Will taking vitamin B12 sublingually help diabetics who also take metformin?
Oh, great question. Okay. So they have all these, since there's so many people who are deficient and so many intestines are not absorbing, they say, well, maybe if we put it under the tongue where there's a lot of vascularity, a lot of veins, that it can be absorbed directly through the tongue. And there are certain things that can. They're usually fat-soluble things like vitamin D. But vitamin B12 is a huge molecule that is not absorbed through membranes very well. So it doesn't absorb under the tongue. So when you take that sublingual vitamin B12, the saliva from under your tongue washes it out, and then you swallow it down. It goes into your stomach, binds to intrinsic factor, then goes all the way down through your small intestine, gets to that 18 inches, and then gets absorbed. So it's not going under the tongue. There's the other one too, which I'm going to just move on to that. The next question is, what about the cream? They make a vitamin B12 cream you can put on, rub it all over your body. Well, yeah, you're going to get tiny microgram quantities of it, but it's not going to be the amount that you can get from your intestines if you're absorbing things normally. It's just such a tiny amount. I wouldn't even think it would be worth it.
Okay, I'm going to scroll back up here. Another question from Krish that she had asked earlier on in the webinar. Dr. Saunders told us earlier that peripheral neuropathy develops even one is in a pre-diabetic state. My question is that in case of diabetes, will subjects experience nervousness and have difficulty in driving? She was saying, or Krish was saying driving, she had commented down below here, even just kind of shakiness when you're driving.
Okay, so that, if I can put that more generally, a general question of, do symptoms of neuropathy, such as a tremor or shaking while driving, or memory deficits, or numbness or tingling, or any of those kinds of things of neuropathy, have anything to do with diabetes, even before somebody's diagnosed with, high blood sugar? The answer is absolutely yes. If you're not getting energy to the system properly, if you have a dysfunction of your metabolism and you can't use energy properly, the nervous system is the first to know about it. The nervous system is so exquisitely sensitive to energy production that's where you're going to notice it first. So this is the proverbial canary in the coal mine. That's telling you there's something wrong here. If you're having these shakes and you're having hypoglycemic episodes and you can't drive, or shaking while driving, or having any of those symptoms of neuropathy, that's your wake-up call to go, hey, something's wrong here. Okay, excellent question.
Will Nervala help with this?
Nervala will help anybody who has it because of a problem with blood flow. So in the nervala, there is something called benfotiamine, and it's in the right amount to repair the lining inside the vein, the arteries, to allow blood to flow properly to the nervous system, to the peripheral nerves, so that they start working again. So that's number one. And number two is the alpha lipoic acid, which is an anti-inflammatory in the mitochondria where the energy is made. So those two things have been shown to improve neuropathy in many cases. But if your problem is because of a lack of vitamin B12, you need vitamin B12. You can't get around that. You can't say, well, I'll take Nervala because I have neuropathy. If your neuropathy is due to something else, like a lack of magnesium, vitamin B12, vitamin B6, folic acid, you need that and not necessarily Nervala.
Okay, great questions, Krish. Thank you. Ernie, this is from Ernie, our friend Ernie in tropical weather. Always jealous of him. Okay. My daughter has some headaches and a swollen left ankle. She has not had any injuries. She's 13 years old. Her pressure is fine and her sugar is fine. What should I be looking for?
Wow. Okay. If we have a few seconds to mention the 1,000 different things that can cause headaches and ankle swelling. Okay. Let's just do generally. Look for inflammation. Look for allergies or allergic reactions, or some kind of reactions. Sometimes people get reactions to even foods that have a very specific problem associated with them. Every time I drink tea, my eyeball hurts. Well, just take the spoon out of your cup and you'll be fine. The problems aren't necessarily correlated, like everybody with headaches has this particular problem. But, you look at the type of headache. It's a migraine headache, then look at deficiencies in magnesium and vitamin B2. If it's an allergic headache, look for what you're allergic to. So looking specifically for the cause is really the way to handle that.
And we do have quite a few questions just about dementia in general, as far as what type of doctors can help with dementia and what medication do people usually prescribe? Or doctors, not people, not regular people, but.
Wow, good question. Okay, so neurologists generally work with people who have dementia. The problem is the neurologists have at their disposal very few things that can help with dementia. They have several medications, a patch and pill, various pills, that are thought to improve memory somewhat. But the research shows that after a few months of taking them, about 3 months, you can't tell the difference between those taking them and those not taking them. So they may have a short-term benefit. But one of the things they absolutely definitely do not do is fix the problem of Alzheimer's or fix dementia or improve dementia or stop the progression of dementia. They do none of those things. If you want to do any of those things, you have to do the Bredesen protocol. And it's a book called The End of Alzheimer's by Dale Bredesen, PhD. And he's at UCLA. And I've had people do this program. I've been doing this program. And it's a brain repair program, and it's mostly a metabolic program. It's really comprehensive. It's how you sleep. It's what you eat. It's when you eat. It's what supplements you take. It's doing memory games and mind games. It's not just here, take this pill and you'll get better. It's a big program. And that's why if you already have like Alzheimer's or dementia, you can't just say, oh, I'll change my lifestyle, because your thought processes are already messed up. So somebody has to get you on this program and push it through on you as an individual, because you can't do it on your own. It's a big program.
Sure. Okay. And are you doing that proactively? Are you just testing it to see how to do it?
Yeah, well, I do it proactively. My grandfather had Alzheimer's disease, and we took care of him. We had my mom, my dad, my brother, me, and grandma taking care of grandpa. And that was a really, really hard thing. And I really feel for all those people who are taking care of loved ones with Alzheimer's disease, where like now insurance companies are saying, well, they only have Alzheimer's, you can take care of them at home. Well, they have no clue how hard that is. 5 adults, and we had a hard time taking care of just grandpa. It was not easy. So I don't want that. So I have done a lot of research into this and looking at it. I go to bed by 10 o'clock. I don't eat after 6. In fact, a lot of times I don't eat after 3. And I fast periodically for 3 days at a time, once a month or so. And I make sure I eat a mostly ketogenic diet. I avoid sugars, and I've checked my nutrients to make sure I have the right zinc to copper ratio, so that my brain works. So yes, proactively I'm doing this, and I do it with my patients too. When they come in, I do tests on them. I do a NutriEval test, a nutrient evaluation, and then all of the other tests for, do they have chronic inflammation, and then we find out why and fix that so that they don't have brain problems.
Awesome. It's always good to know. And it's always fun to know what the doctor's eating and how he's living, right? So thank you.
Well, I'm not perfect.
Well, this is good. This is always good. And this probably is a good time to mention our 610 Reset group that we have on Facebook. If you have not joined that, be sure and do that. You can find it 610 Reset. It's a private group. We've been practicing some of these things that Dr. Saunders has been talking about, not eating after 6, going to bed by 10. And that's where the group was kind of created. And so now Joe's at an okay time to start talking about some of these recipes.
Let's do it.
We're jumping in. So join that group. One of the reasons that you want to be sure to do that is because we were just at a retreat in Utah. If you weren't on in the beginning of this webinar, Joe had mentioned we went on a hike in Utah, but anyway, one of the things that came out of this trip was that we were going to redo some of the recipes in our solution kit. And so we would love to be able to post some of those there, have you guys try them out, give us your feedback. You can kind of help us make some changes to the book, because we know a lot of you, we've gotten to know a lot of you in that group. And so we trust you guys. We want to give you kind of a little bonus too. They're low carb recipes. They're good. I mean, we've handpicked them and we're really excited. So we're going to be trying them. We're going to share them with you. And so give us your feedback. We'll post those maybe a few a week or something like that. But it should.
I was going to add too that the reason we're doing this is we went back and looked at the recipes and we noticed that a lot of them had a lot of ingredients that were maybe hard to find, and the recipes themselves were a little bit complicated. And so we're simplifying recipes. We're trying to keep them to 6 ingredients or less, is it? Something like that, somewhere in there, and a little bit easier to find the ingredients like everywhere in the world. And we're going to kind of standardize the measurements and serving sizes and things like that as well. And also we found some recipes that somehow we put in there that had more carbs than really we were comfortable with. So yeah, we're really cleaning it up, and we would love to, Leslie's going to post some new recipes in the 610 Reset group on Facebook. So go in there and we'll post them, and you guys can cook them up and let us know what you think about them. So if there's any that you really don't like, then maybe we won't put it in the final version of the book, but I think we're going to get some good ones here.
It should be flavorful.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on here to some questions. Again, feel free to post your questions down below or in the chat, or there is a Q&A, I guess, that you can type your questions in as well. But we have Larry. Larry is back. He says, I test my blood sugar at night, 93. Then in the morning, my blood sugar is 105. Why?
Good question. Okay. Even though you don't eat anything or your stomach gets empty, you have to maintain your blood sugar in this certain range. The range has to be the same all the time. If it drops below that range, then you get hypoglycemia, and your heart and your brain are starving for sugar. They need some energy. If you go above that range, then you start attaching too much sugars to other molecules, your hemoglobin A1C goes up, and then the blood-brain barrier starts decreasing, the transport protein, and all those problems happen. So that range needs to be maintained. So when you don't eat, you have another hormone that we haven't talked much about called glucagon. Glucagon is also made in the pancreas, just like insulin. It's made actually in the same place as insulin, in the islet cells, and it gets released when the insulin drops down. You start releasing glucagon. Glucagon goes to your liver primarily, but also your muscle cells, and turns all your glycogen into sugar. So it's you start making sugar, and if you don't have enough of that, then it'll start turning your proteins into sugar. So your blood sugar can actually go up from not eating if you make a lot of glucagon. Can't hear you, Leslie.
There we go. There we go.
Okay.
Okay, great question. Another question: does smoking affect good blood sugar readings?
Yeah, actually, smoking should lower your blood sugar. And the reason is
But don't start.
Oh yeah, okay, fine. The adrenal hormones like cortisol make you resistant to insulin and make your blood sugar go up. Now that's an automatic reaction. It's nothing you have control over. When you're really stressed out, you got to run from the tiger, as they say. You got to run, as far as you can in this fight or flight mode. You need sugar. You need that quick energy. You can't run as fast on fat as you can on sugar. So what happens is you release a whole bunch of cortisol that makes you resistant to insulin, so that your blood sugar goes up, so that your brain and heart have plenty of sugar, so that you can think and get away and everything, all that you need to do. Now, if you're stressed out, then you're going to get higher blood sugar. If you go out and smoke and relax, then your blood sugar should drop down.
All right, this is good. Okay, with good blood sugar readings below 100, can I stop taking Xarelto blood thinners in the future?
Oh, you have to know why you're taking Xarelto, because that blood thinner is given usually for people that have atrial fibrillation. And what that does is causes clots to form in the heart, which then go into your body. And since your brain's getting 20% of that, that means you have a 20% chance that clot is going to go into your brain and create a stroke. So be careful with changing those kind of things. You really have to work with your doctor and say, do I really need this? And what are the alternatives? What could I do instead? It depends on why you're on it.
Sure. Okay, we're going to answer, I think, just a couple more questions here. What effect does a prednisone injection have on diabetes when you're using it because of optical neuritis? And why does this occur?
Oh, okay. We did talk about the eyeballs. We talked about optic neuritis and why it happens in diabetes. So if you go to the previous webinar, I'll explain all about that, what the optic neuritis is and what it does and why it happens and what you can do about it. As far as the prednisone injection, that is a cortisone that's injected directly into the eyeball. And what it does is decreases inflammation. It's kind of like putting a cortisone injection in your shoulder when you have shoulder pain or a knee or something like that. And that decreases inflammation because of this chronic inflammation. The eye is destroying the eyeball. It's destroying the retina. So when you have, so then the question is, does the prednisone injected into your eye affect your whole body and cause the blood sugar to go up? It should not, appreciably. That the amounts that are used are so tiny compared to what your adrenal glands are making as far as cortisone. It's not going to appreciably affect your blood sugar.
Okay. Larry says, thank you for answering all of his questions. You bet, Larry. That's what we enjoy doing on these webinars. And it's fun because Dr. Saunders, I try to trick him with really hard questions, but he always knows the answer. It's so annoying, Dr. Saunders.
No. There were times I didn't know the answer.
I'm just kidding. We're so thankful for him because he spends so much time researching all of these things and the problems that diabetics are facing. we're just very thankful for him. And yeah, I'd like to answer or have these questions answered too. So okay, so we do have a question here from Joanne. Let's see. My friend is diabetic and she has brain lapses. She would totally not remember when these happen. She's very compliant with her medication. Her blood sugar is always under control. She has no history of epilepsy in her family. Can you give some feedback on this?
Well, okay, so there's one assumption being made there is that the brain lapse has something to do with epilepsy. Epilepsy is a misfiring of the brain or too much when the brain, gosh, the way the brain works is amazing. You have one cell that has dendrites coming in to stimulate in different places. So some are stimulating and some are blocking, some are suppressing. And if you don't have enough suppressing, then you can have stimulation, and everything firing at the same time. And that's one of the things we call epilepsy. So, so the lapse is now, because it's firing randomly, it's not creating memory. And so you can't bring out any memory, so you have a lapse. They used to call them absence seizures, and now, anyway, it's like a memory lapse. That's one possibility, but that's not the only one. You could have the same kind of issue if you get hypoglycemia. So someone who's really compliant with their medications and their blood sugars are always normal, and then sometimes they drop low, they can get memory lapses. So you have to look into that. When there's a memory lapse, is there low blood sugar? And one of the things to be careful of is there's relative low blood sugar. And that is, remember the blood-brain barrier, you can decrease the number of glucose transport proteins. And so if you're normally 300, then you need this much to get the glucose from your blood into your brain. And then your blood sugar drops down, and now you can't get any more glucose into your brain. And so you can have relative brain hypoglycemia by dropping to a normal blood sugar. So there's that issue too. So why the lapses happen? The first thing to do is find out why. Is it a seizure, or is it hypoglycemia, or is it just low blood pressure? Because if the pressure drops low, then the blood runs out of your head and you get the same problem. So any of those issues might or others. Finding the cause, that's what it is. Can't hear you, Leslie.
We're both on mute, just listening to your wisdom.
Okay, that was our final question. That's what I was trying to say while I was muted. So Joe, do you have anything to add?
No, I think this has been awesome and covered a lot of good territory. My brain is already feeling better from this last hour. So thank you, Dr. Saunders.
We didn't overload your brain with too much.
Well, it is easy to do, I will admit. But no, this is great. So yeah, let me just wrap up here. Thank you, Dr. Saunders, for your help with all these questions once again. And thank you, Leslie, for your participation in leading us and facilitating this and getting us live on YouTube and all that good stuff. And thank you to our participants for being here. Without you, we wouldn't have this webinar or reason to. And so we're thankful for your questions and comments and feedback and sharing and all that. So, and we're going to be back here next Tuesday at noon Central Time. If you have any questions, come on over to our Facebook group it's called the 610 Reset, which you can find it at bartonwebinar.com. And let's see what else. I think, yeah, go to our YouTube page, subscribe there as well. That is growing steadily, which is great. And so I will say one quick little thing. So Dr. Saunders, spending time with you in Utah, we were inspired. I mean, you've always inspired us, but I think getting together, as a team, we are committing the next 30 days to like getting into the best shape of our lives. So we're gonna be implementing all of the strategies that you've been teaching us as a team. We're gonna, do our best to practice what we preach. And so, some of us, like I told the team, some of us have taken this coronavirus time in our little cocoon and, chrysalis time to maybe put on a few extra pounds, and others have taken the time to like get in shape. So, but for those that are like, maybe I shouldn't have eaten that entire chocolate cake that Cheryl made for us or whatever, we're going to take the next 30 days. We're going to be just like shredding some fat. And so if people want to join us, we're going to be sharing our journeys, taking before and after pictures, and really trying to, show some results of that. So,
And we'll use this group as our accountability. So
yeah.
now that Joe told you, you have to hold us accountable to it.
Yeah.
And we'll do the same for you if you want us to. So,
yeah, that's right. So, I mean, there's never a bad time to start to do these things. So if you're struggling with your weight or with confidence and even brain issues, like this is seriously, like he said, diabetes is the #1 cause of Alzheimer's, and nobody wants Alzheimer's for what it does to yourself and to your family and loved ones. And so, prevention, it doesn't sell very well. It's not as motivational because you don't have this massive red alert problem. But if you can put yourself forward and think about like, man, if I'm already starting to show symptoms and I'm only X years old or whatever, like you gotta, do things now to start implementing healthy habits and make it a new lifestyle. So, Dr. Saunders, anything you want to say to Team Barton here and any others that are looking to just radically go for it?
Yeah. Make sure that you don't give up. It's getting on a path. It's not about like when you get off the path. They say that in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not how many times you fall down, it's how many times you get back up. All you have to do is get up just as many times as you fall, and you end up, and that's the key. So staying with it is really important. I really admire people who stay with it.
Yes. All right. Well, no quitters in this group, right, Leslie?
We got this. It's gonna be good.
I think we have 10 or 11 people on the Barton team that are doing this and that are excited about it. So, yeah. All right. Well, good stuff. We'll be back next week. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your week. Take care. God bless.
Bye.
Bye-bye.